Hello, I'm Carol Bingley and I work in the product development team here at RSSL. Today, I would like to talk through some of the factors to consider when developing a new product and bringing it to the market. I will also pass on some hints and tips from my experience in developing new products. So to start with, you need a product idea. An inspiration for this can come from different sources. It may be a personal passion that you have for a type of food or drink. This could be something that you prepare for family and friends, or it could be from observing some upcoming trends. Trend data is widely available from a huge range of sources, such as reports and webinars. And you may have listened to the webinar that we held recently with Mintel on this topic. But it can also come from carrying out your own research on social media and from travel, visiting food markets and eating in restaurants when these things are allowed again. Wherever your inspiration comes from, it's important to carry out research to ensure that this idea has sufficient appeal to translate into healthy sales. And I'll talk about ways to do this over the next couple of slides. It's always a good approach to start by checking out the competitive landscape. For example, are there similar products on the market, either here or in other countries? What makes these products successful? Or if they have been withdrawn from the market, why did they fail? If you can get hold of samples, then taste the product and assess the appearance, flavour, texture, mouthfeel of the product and decide whether it needs to be improved or modified for your target consumer. Examining the back of pack and looking at the ingredient declaration and understanding the function of the ingredients can help to give you a starting point for your formulation. Also look to see whether the ingredients or nutritional profile allows for any claims to be made on pack. And don't forget to look at how the product is priced, packaged and positioned within the supermarket or wherever it's sold. A current market product can act as a benchmark for your development, and this is relevant whether you want a match for that product or an improvement over your product. So if we look at understanding your target consumer, it's vital that you understand your target consumer in order to develop the right product for them. No product has universal appeal, and so if you can identify who will be buying and consuming your product and develop with them in mind, you're much more likely to be successful. Some of the characteristics to understand include things like age range, disposable income, domestic situation. For example, are they living alone or are they cooking for a family? Their typical eating habits. Are they looking for an on-the-go solution or do they want a product which can be used as part of a meal? And also understanding their ethical viewpoint. Will they be interested in the provenance of the ingredients or interested in the carbon footprint of the product? Ideally, this should be done before you start development, but then you can also check in with consumers during the process. There are a number of ways that you can speak to your consumers, and these include focus groups, social listening, and by taking products to consumers. The current situation means that it's not possible to get prospective consumers in a room for a focus group, so other approaches will be necessary. And these can include things like virtual focus groups with product concepts, or by sending products for people to try at home and then discuss with the group online. Social media has shifted the dynamic between consumers and brands and is becoming increasingly valuable because consumers now have the power to engage in a two-way dialogue and make more informed buying decisions. A recent poll carried out by Nielsen showed that over 80% of people seek recommendations before making a purchase of any kind, and this is often done by reaching out to their social media networks. This means that social media is a great tool for brands to understand consumer needs and discover what their consumers are looking for in a product. And finally, by understanding the lifestyle and interests of your target consumer, you can also gain real-life feedback on ideas and products by taking products to venues such as university campuses, sports clubs, or music festivals, and talking directly to those potential consumers. Obviously, this one's probably not feasible in the present climate, but can be considered when life starts to resume some sort of normality. So you now know what product you want to develop and who you'll be selling this product to. Next, you'll need to establish the parameters of the product before starting work in the lab. I would suggest by starting with defining your target nutritional profile. Many of the new products coming to the market are promoted on the basis of their nutritional benefits, and this is in part because of increasing pressure to improve the nutritional profile of the food we buy, coming from governments, NGOs, and also from the consumers. It's much easier to set nutritional targets up front rather than try and develop a great tasting product and then look to reduce ingredients or nutrients such as fat, sugar, or salt, or boost the protein and fiber content whilst expecting the product to stay the same. There's sometimes temptation to try and meet multiple nutritional targets for one product, but this is often not feasible, and it can also be somewhat confusing for the consumer. It can be helpful to think of this in terms of must-haves and nice-to-haves. For example, you may decide that your product must have a high fiber claim and ideally a green traffic light for salt on the front of pack. However, you may need to compromise and accept an amber traffic light in order to achieve the desired taste profile or shelf life. Moving on to ingredient sourcing, which is a critical step in product development and can often take much longer than expected. It's useful if you can identify in and out of scope ingredients early on in the project. You may want to make certain claims around the presence or absence of certain ingredients or nutrients. For example, you may want to claim source of omega-3 or state that the product contains no palm oil. So deciding on these factors can help to define and narrow the list of ingredients that need to be sourced. Ingredient suppliers can be found through internet searches, by visiting exhibitions, and by talking to your contract manufacturer. As with the nutritional profile, it can be helpful to understand must-haves and nice-to-haves. For example, you may be developing a vegan meat alternative and decide that it has to be gluten-free and preferably also soya-free, but you may be prepared to compromise on the soya if it delivers a desirable taste to the product or helps to manage ingredient costs. If issues such as organic or provenance of ingredients are important to your target consumer, then these factors should be taken into account when you're sourcing the ingredients. However, this can have a big impact on costs, so you should only really go down this route if you are sure that it brings a significant benefit to your product. The taste and texture of the product are always going to be the most important factor in determining whether a consumer comes back and buys your product after the initial trial. So getting the right combination of ingredients at the right levels and through your process is critical. The skill of the product developer lies in being able to identify those ingredients and knowing how to optimize the formulation to achieve the desired end product. This can be an iterative process, or you can utilize statistical tools such as response surface methodology. The knowledge and expertise of ingredient suppliers is a valuable part of this process, so I would recommend building good relationships with your suppliers to be able to draw on that knowledge and expertise. The label is your primary communication with your consumer and the way that your product stands out on shelf. We've seen that consumers are becoming more and more interested in what goes into their food, and this has resulted in a growth in what is known as clean label. Clean label is usually defined as a short ingredient list with ingredients that consumers can understand and pronounce. On the slide, there is an example of an ice cream product that calls out on front of pack that it is only made from 5 ingredients. This can sometimes be frustrating for the food technologist, as it can restrict the use of highly functional ingredients, which are sometimes the only route to achieving a particular texture or a desired shelf life. If you do need to use these ingredients, then a growing number of manufacturers are using their websites to provide further information about the function and provenance of each of the ingredients in their products. And this can be used to help to reassure consumers about some of the unfamiliar words on the back of the pack. You may also want to make claims such as vegan or free from or nutritional statements on the pack to signal to consumers that the product is suitable for their dietary requirements. If you're doing this, it is important to understand the legislation and requirements associated with these claims, particularly in respect to allergens, where mislabeling could have very serious consequences. I'll talk over the legislation on the next few slides. The overarching regulation for labelling food products is the provision of information to consumers, EC 1169/2011. This lays out requirements for information that has to appear on your pack, including ingredients, nutritional information, and the compulsory emphasising of allergens in the ingredient list. If you look on the Food Standards Agency website, you'll find a comprehensive guide to labelling, and this can be used to help you navigate the legal requirements. If you wish to make the additional claims that I mentioned on the previous slide, such as vegan or allergen-free claims, these are viewed as voluntary claims and as so must comply with the criteria laid down by the Provision of Information Act. Essentially, these claims must not be ambiguous, misleading, and must be based on relevant scientific data. The FDF has produced a guide to vegan and allergen-free claims, which is worth reviewing if you are planning to take this route, as there are many considerations to take into account. Here at RSSL, we can also help to ensure that you meet requirements to make these claims, both through formulation and manufacture of your product. So moving on to nutrition and health claims, I mentioned earlier that these can be a good way to make your product stand out from the competition and to communicate the benefits of your product to the consumer. However, you need to ensure that any claims comply with regulations. There are specific requirements that must be met to enable nutrition claims such as high protein or no added sugar, and these can be found on the European Commission website shown on the slide. You should bear in mind that the Provision of Information Consumers Act also applies on these claims, so the information should not be misleading. For example, if you made a fat-free claim on a soft drink, it could be viewed as misleading, as it may imply that competitor products contain fat, and obviously this would not be the case. If you wish to make a health claim relating to any of the ingredients or nutrients in your product, then you need to consult the EFSA Health Claims website. All approved claims have been through rigorous assessment, and conditions of use and suggested wording for the claim is provided on the website. An example of this could be adding certain vitamins and minerals which have an approved health claim relating to supporting the normal function of the immune system. In order to use this claim, you would need to ensure that the vitamins and minerals are added at levels which at least meet the minimum requirements by the end of shelf life. Often products are launched without full stability data. However, if you are planning to make claims on your product, then we would recommend that you have data to substantiate these claims, and Rob will talk about this in more detail. You will also need to ensure that the ingredients that you wish to use in your product are approved and that you are not exceeding maximum use levels for those ingredients. Ingredients such as sweeteners, stabilizers, and preservatives are all classed as additives, so you'll need to comply with maximum use levels and conditions for use set out in the food additive regulations. This is an area where your ingredient supplier will be able to guide you and provide advice. If you're using an ingredient which was not consumed significantly before May 1997, then it will be classed as novel food and will need to be approved as novel food through EFSA. You will need to ensure that you comply with the criteria of use specified for the ingredient in terms of food category and the use level. And again, your supplier should be able to support you with this. So to move on to process and manufacturing, you may have in-house manufacturing capability, but for many small companies, the likelihood is that a contract manufacturer will be required, at the very least in the early days. Although this slide's coming a little bit later in my presentation, I would always recommend starting your search for your contract manufacturer as early as possible in the process. This is because knowing the manufacturing process will help to guide formulation development, and it will often make sense to use ingredients or ingredient suppliers already being used by your manufacturer, as this can help with costs and sourcing. It will also help to shorten your timeline to launch, because identifying and approving a contract manufacturer can sometimes be a very lengthy process. When you approach manufacturers, it is helpful to have a clear idea of what you need them to take responsibility for and what you will handle yourself. You should also ensure that your IP is fully protected before sharing formulations. Some of the questions you need to ask include what costs are involved, including ingredient and packaging costs. What is the typical timeline for manufacturing a new product? And what are the minimum and maximum volumes that the manufacturer can handle? You may find that you need to visit a number of different manufacturers to find one who can meet your requirements, and then run pilot trials to manage the transfer of your formulation from bench scale through to production. Finally, you need to decide on how your product will be packaged. At very basic level, food packaging is there to contain and protect the product over shelf life, and should also not interact in any way with the food or drink matrix. However, novel and/or attractive packaging can also help to make your product stand out on shelf and provide convenience to the consumer. Understanding your target consumer can really help with this. For example, will the product be thrown into a gym bag and consumed on the go? Or are you developing for a person living alone, in which case portionable or resealable packaging would be helpful to their lifestyle? Consumers are more and more interested in what happens to the packaging after use, so options which can be recycled, composted, or reused in some way are increasingly popular. These options may add cost, so to be sure to build this into your model or to check that your consumer is willing to pay more for a product in a more environmentally friendly pack. You should also discuss packaging options with your contract manufacturer early on to ensure that your packaging can be handled on their lines. I would now like to hand over to Rob, who's going to talk a little bit more about the analytical support and shelf life testing.
Thank you, Carol. My name is Rob Griffiths, and I'm a technical specialist in the Oils, Fats and Lipids department at RSSL. I'm going to talk about the use of analysis to help your product development and also the evaluation of shelf life. I'll use some examples, some of which from my own experience of analysing oils and fats. As Carol has described, there are many stages and things to consider when developing a new product, and it's recommended to consult with the manufacturer early in the process. It can also be beneficial to consult with an analytical laboratory early in the process, and I'm going to highlight some of the ways analysis can help. Once you have a product or formulation in mind, you will need to source ingredients, potentially from a choice of suppliers. Analysis might help in deciding on the most cost-effective or value for money by comparing the quality, level or purity of ingredient, stability, and authenticity. Is it from the source or grade claimed? For example, is it extra virgin oil versus olive oil? Analysis can also confirm the absence of degradation, impurities, contaminants, which could be important if making free from or allergens claims. If your ingredient or food is new, it might need a submission to EFSA for novel ingredients or novel food approval. And this was covered in our recent food regulatory webinar on novel foods. The impact of processing on your product or formulation needs to be considered. Analysis will help you to confirm initial dosage levels and the levels of ingredient throughout the key stages of the process to determine its stability and whether an overage of the ingredients or actives is required to meet any claims. You might need to consider if there are any undesirables produced or introduced that might impact the quality or food safety. For example, process contaminants like acrylamide or microbial activity or degradation through oxidation. Analysis will be required to generate the information for nutritional labels and also the data to substantiate any label claims. For example, if you're making nutritional claims, health claims, free from, or vegan. And I'm going to talk more about this shortly. The stability of your product or the ingredients will need to be assessed over a period of time to ensure that the product maintains the expected quality and level of any active or claimed ingredient throughout its shelf life. And I will talk about this later in the presentation. The packaging can have a significant impact on the stability of a product over its shelf life. Sometimes evaluation of the effectiveness of these packaging options needs to be assessed. However, packaging can sometimes have a negative impact if it's not compatible with the product or storage conditions, and sometimes an assessment of what can migrate or leach from packaging might need to be conducted. So once a product has been launched, analysis can be used for regular QC checks as part of your due diligence program. Unfortunately, it is possible that issues will arise during the product development or post-launch that will require some troubleshooting, for example, processing or shelf life issues. And this is when analysis can help to understand the causes and sometimes help find solutions. Next, I'm going to focus on two of these areas, claim substantiation and stability shelf life assessment. As Carol described earlier, if you intend to make claims for your new product, then you will need to ensure the product can meet these, since there are strict rules on using product claims. This is where an analytical laboratory can provide support in generating the data or evidence that might be required. For example, analysis can support making ingredient content or nutrition claims by quantifying the amount of the ingredient in the product or by confirming the product is reduced in or high in certain ingredients compared to standard versions of the product as per the nutritional claims definitions. If you wish to make claims with respect to levels of certain allergens, this will need to be verified by analysis. Likewise, you might require analysis to confirm that products are free of animal-derived ingredients to make claims as vegan or vegetarian. For functional foods or natural products which have health claims related to active ingredient, for example, vitamins, minerals, or botanicals, then analysis will be required to confirm the levels of the active ingredient or natural product present. And this can produce a number of challenges for the analytical laboratory. So there are many challenges for the analyst, not only getting results out on time, but also challenges related to the product and active ingredient. Many of these challenges are similar to those faced by the product developer. The most important thing to remember is to use a laboratory you can trust and to engage with the laboratory as soon as possible. To highlight a few examples of these challenges, firstly, it's sampling. We need to make sure the sample is representative before analysis is conducted. We need to confirm the source of the ingredient or form of active that is used to ensure the appropriate methods are selected. For example, an analytical method for beta-carotene is very different to the analytical method used for retinol, despite the fact that both compounds are vitamin A. It is also important to take into account the stability of the ingredient or product. Is it prone to hydrolysis, oxidation, or microbial activity? This last point leads me on to the next area where the analytical laboratory can provide help, which is stability and shelf life testing. So there are many ways that products can be impacted over their shelf life. For example, microbial spoilage, which can impact organoleptic properties, but can also have food safety concerns and impacts on health. Aside from food safety, there can be changes in texture of a product through its shelf life, such as drying out or softening of products, which are often due to moisture gain or loss. There can also be changes in flavor and color. There can be deterioration in the product or ingredients causing a reduction in the levels of vitamins, minerals, botanicals, or actives, and I will give an example of this shortly. Oils and fats have a significant part to play in a product's performance during its shelf life and can have an impact on texture, appearance, and flavor. However, one of the biggest impacts on shelf life is through the oxidation of oils and fats, producing off notes and flavors or rancidity, which I'll talk about later. As I mentioned earlier, there can be deterioration in the product or ingredients, and vitamins are an example which are particularly affected. There are a number of factors that affect the stability of vitamins and functional ingredients. For example, time or length of shelf life, light, temperature, but also the presence of other ingredients that can improve stability, such as antioxidants, or the presence of components that can catalyze deterioration, such as certain metals. These factors can affect different ingredients in different ways. For example, vitamin C is affected by oxidation, but not light, while B vitamins are highly sensitive to light. Another aspect to consider when adding vitamins to your formulation is understanding their chemical structure. For example, if you're going to add fat-soluble vitamins into a drink, they might need to be added as a coated or encapsulated form of the ingredient to ensure they remain within the drink and don't separate out. The physical characteristics of the vitamins also play a key role in the stability of the ingredient. As an example on the slide, you can see the effect of a granular form of the vitamin versus a fine powder. The granular has less surface area exposed to oxidation, and as such will be more stable over a period of time, as demonstrated by the greater level being retained after a period of storage. Packaging can also help to increase shelf life in your product. For example, opaque bottles improve the stability of products containing ingredients sensitive to light. Reducing the headspace in bottles helps with ingredients that are sensitive to oxidation. Many of these different aspects need to be considered to ensure your finished product has the right level of active ingredient to meet claims made throughout the whole of its shelf life. As highlighted earlier, the oxidation of fat generating rancid off notes is one of the main limiting factors of a product's shelf life. These off notes will often cause a product to be unacceptable and rejected by the consumer, who is then unlikely to repurchase, and this can have a significant implication on products and on brands. It can also cause reduction in the level of active ingredients, such as omega-3 fatty acid, so that it no longer meets the claims made. Therefore, oxidative stability and shelf life is something that needs to be considered for many foods. There are two general approaches for testing oxidative stability: real-time testing or storage studies, and also accelerated testing. Real-time testing involves determining the oxidative state of the oil, fat, or product at several time points throughout its shelf life. The level of oxidation is determined using appropriate methods to make sure you get the most useful data, and is ideally conducted alongside sensory evaluation. All of this can be both time-consuming and quite costly if there are many product variants to assess, and this can sometimes limit what you would like to consider for testing. This is where some of the accelerated instruments we have available can be really valuable. As Carol highlighted earlier, products are sometimes launched without full stability or shelf life data on a risk basis. Accelerated studies and analyses can provide some data more quickly to give some reassurance and reduce this risk. So we have two instruments that can be used to evaluate the oxidative stability of ingredients and products through accelerated testing. These are the Oxipress and Ransomat, and I will use a case study to demonstrate their usefulness. These instruments basically work by holding samples at elevated temperatures in the presence of air or oxygen to accelerate the oxidation process. We typically get oxidation curves as shown in the slide. The end point of the analysis is when you see the rapid increase in the curve for the Ransomat, as shown in the middle of the slide, or a rapid decrease for the Oxipress. Now, the Oxipress is particularly useful because we can test for raw materials and finished products. In this case study, a customer had received complaints about their snack product tasting off or rancid during its shelf life. We confirmed rancidity using other techniques that I've not described today, but the next stage was to determine the root cause and a solution. We suspected the oil used in the manufacture was not suitably stable for the product, and we were able to quickly evaluate this oil and an equivalent from a different supplier, and also an alternative type of oil, plus one with added antioxidants. And from the Ransomat analysis of these oils, there was clearly better stability of the new proposed oils. The client then reformulated their product using this oil, and we used the Oxipress to compare the reformulated product versus the current one, and were able to demonstrate a greatly improved oxidative stability. We were able to extrapolate the Oxipress data to give an estimate of the shelf life of the reformulated product to approximately 12 months, and this was in line with the desired shelf life. This comparison of different ingredients and reformulated product was very quick. It took approximately 8 to 9 days of analysis time, but this allowed the customer to confirm the problem, reformulate, and have confidence in the shelf life of the reformulated product very rapidly. The quick assessment of oxidative stability of several different ingredients and formulations is where these accelerated instruments can really help. They can also be used to assess the impact of processing conditions on the stability of your product. For example, the effect of heating temperatures and times, or aeration in your product. It has also been used to look at the impacts of packaging on shelf life. These instruments can also be used to provide an estimation or guidance on shelf life. For example, by comparing Oxypress results for a similar product with a known shelf life, it can provide guidance for a new product. We've done a lot of work using these instruments and have a lot of experience in their use, and coupled with some of the routine and advanced techniques for real-time testing, we're able to offer broad capability in this area. So just to sum up, the main benefits of stability or shelf life testing, especially using accelerated techniques, are the speed of analysis for optimization of processes and formulation, allowing several formulations to be narrowed down with quicker and less costly analysis. And one of the main benefits to the developer is reduced development time and a quicker route to market. Importantly, conducting these types of studies can also protect your products and brands through ensuring product quality throughout the whole of its shelf life. The optimization of ingredients and processes can also help to reduce costs and potentially extend shelf life, therefore having less wastage. Lastly, analysis can also be used to verify label claims and to ensure the levels are maintained throughout the whole shelf life. So to finish off, hopefully this has demonstrated the benefits of analytical testing at different stages of the product development process, and also highlighted the benefits of consulting with your analytical laboratory early in the process. And on that note, I will now hand back over to Jane.
Okay, so thank you, Carol and Rob, for an in-depth overview around how to turn your concept into reality. As you can see, there's lots of aspects to consider to ensure a successful product launch. COVID-19 will change all kinds of consumer behaviour, values and priorities, which is likely to impact product innovation. So hopefully from today's webinar, you can see that support is available to ensure a successful, innovative product is developed and launched into our changing world. So thank you to all those attendees who've asked some questions. We'll now start to work through some of those questions. So the first question is for you, Carol, I think. So how long does it take typically to develop a product and launch a new product?
It really varies. It's dependent on the product, how unique that product is, whether you need to look for very unusual ingredients, whether you're looking for a new way of processing. So it really does vary from product to product. The shortest time is probably around 6 months, and that would really need you to get your contract manufacturer in place early on in that process to ensure that you can parallel track the development along with the process.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Next question's for you, Rob. Are the accelerated shelf life tests, Rancimat and Oxypress, suitable for all products?
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, these instruments are incredibly useful, but the Rancimat is an instrument that can only really be used for oils and fats or high-fat products, whereas the Oxypress can be used for ingredients and finished products. However, it does have some limitations. However, the advantage of the Oxypress is that you can analyze whole samples rather than having to break them up or grind them up to the sample to a powder. And this gives a better reflection of what the sample will be like during its shelf life. But when you have some samples that are made of different layers that might melt and mix at high temperatures of the test, or if you have emulsions that might break down, it might not be suitable for this test. We also find samples with particularly high moisture and low fat don't work as well with these instruments. But in these situations, we can then carry out instead storage studies in which we store samples and test them over time for the oxidation compounds produced. So we developed and validated a method specifically for measuring the compounds that cause the characteristic rancid off notes that are produced during oxidation. Now, advantage of this method, it's very sensitive and it can detect some of these oxidation compounds before you can actually perceive them sensorially. And it can also measure a large number of compounds, which we can sometimes then use to link the analytical measurement to sensory. And this in itself could be a big advantage in that it reduces the need for some time-consuming sensory evaluation. So basically, there are some product types that the oxypress enhancement don't work as well for, but in these cases, we do have alternative approaches.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Next one for you, Carol. So what do you think the impact of the current COVID-19 pandemic will be on product development?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think obviously there will be a number of influences from the current situation. One thing that we are seeing is that people are becoming more and more interested in their health and taking responsibility for their health. And part of that will be through the foods that they eat. And we are seeing that there's a growing interest in using ingredients which can be added to food. So things like vitamins, minerals, botanicals, other ingredients which may be associated with improving the overall nutritional profile, and particularly if there are links to immune health. So we believe that there will be a growth in that sector, and it's something we're going to explore in an upcoming webinar around immunity and these sorts of ingredients.
Thank you, Carol. Next one for Rob. What can I do if the product I launched is not meeting shelf life?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, ideally analysis would be carried out prior to launch to give an idea of the stability, but we do appreciate that there's not always enough time to carry out a full shelf life. As I mentioned earlier, there can be several mechanisms that can cause a product to fail during its shelf life. So if a product is failing, the analytical lab can often help determine the root cause of that product failure. But any sensory descriptions of how the product is failing can help direct the type of analysis to confirm this failure mechanism. And this can then help determine the likely cause. So for example, if you have rancid off notes, it could be related to a fat ingredient that does not have sufficient stability, or there might be interactions between ingredients which are causing instability. So this is where an experienced analytical lab and product developer can make suggestions about alternative ingredients, or maybe more compatible ingredients, or maybe even use of ingredients such as antioxidants that can improve the stability. I think the really important point is to consult as soon as possible, and the more information you can provide on the product and the issue can really help in getting to the root cause more quickly.
Thank you, Rob. That's really good. So we've now come to the end of the webinar, conscious of time. I hope you found it useful, and we appreciate the questions that you've asked. And sorry we haven't managed to get to answer all of the questions in the time we have today, but we will respond to you separately outside the webinar. But hopefully that's given you an understanding of the challenges around developing and bringing a new product to the market, and how our product development team and our analytical labs can support you. So on behalf of the RSL team, I'd like to thank you for listening today, and please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions or you need our support with projects. We will send out a copy of the slides to you following the session, and please do watch out for our next webinar, which are currently being planned. And as Carol has already mentioned, we're hoping to plan one on the topic of immunity soon. And lastly, once the coronavirus situation has improved, we look forward to meeting you at future events and hope that we'll be able to meet face to face. But in the meantime, thanks for your time. I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and please do stay safe in these challenging times. Bye.